In the bustling world of legal powerhouses, few stood out quite like Jonathan Mercer. A liberal lawyer in his 40s, Mercer had carved a prominent niche for himself in both the courtroom and the political arena. Armed with a prestigious law degree from Yale and years of experience at one of the country's top firms, he had defended high-profile clients while championing progressive causes. His reputation for winning cases was matched only by his penchant for grandstanding in public forums, where he frequently articulated his views on social justice, environmental issues, and economic reform. Mercer's tall stature and tailored suits commanded attention wherever he went, but it was his sharp tongue that truly set him apart. He thrived on debates, often engaging in spirited exchanges on television and social media. His followers adored him for his quick wit and biting criticism of conservative ideologies. Still, that very charm sometimes slipped into arrogance, leading him to dismiss opponents as less competent or informed. On one such occasion, Mercer found himself embroiled in a heated discussion during a local political panel. As he confidently laid out his vision for a more equitable society, he caught wind of an up-and-coming politician who had recently begun making waves. Karoline Leavitt. Her grassroots campaigns and bold rhetoric had started to gain traction among constituents who were tired of traditional politics. To Mercer, she was merely a novice, someone to be laughed off rather than taken seriously. "Who is this Karoline Leavitt?" he quipped during a particularly lively exchange, eliciting laughter from the audience. A young conservative shouting slogans without an understanding of real policy. "Please." The comment earned him applause from some, but whispers began to swirl about whether underestimating Leavitt could backfire. This dismissive attitude towards Leavitt wasn't just frivolous banter, it represented a deeper seed of contempt towards her rising popularity. With every snide remark, Mercer solidified his belief that he was untouchable, an assumption that would soon be put to the test. He reveled in his role as a self-declared arbiter of progressive thought, failing to recognize how quickly the tides of public opinion could shift. As days turned into weeks following that panel discussion, Mercer continued to bask in his own brilliance while dismissing concerns from colleagues about Leavitt's growing influence. He remained blissfully unaware that behind her carefully crafted political persona was an astute strategist who understood the pulse of her community far better than he did. The stage was set for what would become a dramatic clash between two contrasting visions for the future, a clash propelled by misunderstanding and hubris that would ultimately lead to Mercer's undoing. In his world filled with accolades and applause, little did Jonathan Mercer know that destiny had other plans waiting just around the corner. Karoline Leavitt emerged onto the political stage with an energy that was hard to ignore. In her late 20s, she was a fresh face in the conservative landscape, armed with a fierce determination and a vision for change. Growing up in a small town, Leavitt had always been acutely aware of the struggles faced by everyday citizens, experiences that fueled her passion for politics from a young age. Her family, rooted in traditional values, instilled in her the importance of hard work and community service, principles she carried into her new role as a politician. With an undergraduate degree from a respected university, where she majored in political science, Leavitt understood not only the mechanics of politics but also the foundational issues affecting her constituents. Her early career included stints working for local advocacy groups and briefly as a congressional staffer, where she honed her skills at navigating complex policy landscapes and learned the art of coalition building. Having witnessed firsthand how legislation impacts people's lives, she became committed to advocating for transparency, fiscal responsibility, and robust community engagement. What set Leavitt apart was her ability to connect with voters on a personal level. Unlike many seasoned politicians who often felt distant from their constituents, she embraced her grassroots approach, frequently organizing town hall meetings and listening tours. Her authentic style resonated with audiences who yearned for representation that reflected their own struggles and aspirations. This connection was exacerbated by her adept use of social media. Through platforms like Twitter and Instagram, Leavitt shared snippets of her life alongside messages about policy changes and community initiatives that inspired others to rally behind her cause. Leavitt's platform revolved around several key issues, promoting economic development in struggling regions, improving educational opportunities for children, and ensuring accessible health care for all families. However, it was her unwavering stance on social conservatism that particularly endeared her to many within her party, an aspect that directly positioned her against Mercer's liberal ideologies. When Jonathan Mercer laughed off Leavitt during the political panel discussion, he inadvertently ignited a spark within her. While he saw an inexperienced challenger easy to dismiss, she viewed his condescension as fuel to enhance her resolve. Rather than shy away from confrontation or criticism, Leavitt thrived under pressure and used it as motivation to amplify her voice further. As days turned into weeks following the panel's fallout, Karoline continued gaining traction among voters dissatisfied with the status quo. Her ambitious nature mirrored the sentiments of many who felt overlooked in political dialogue. It wasn't long before whispers turned into rallies, and skeptics began paying attention, not just to what she stood for but also to the powerful message crafted by this determined young woman, determined to prove herself on a larger stage. In this unfolding narrative of two distinct political figures, one confident and dismissive while the other tenacious and connected, the clash seemed inevitable. Each step forward brought them closer together in their diverging paths toward leadership in an ever-evolving political landscape. The political panel had drawn a diverse crowd eager to hear the contrasting views of its participants. As the discussion unfolded, tension simmered beneath the surface, a dynamic interplay between seasoned politicians and fresh faces vying for attention. At the heart of this charged atmosphere sat Jonathan Mercer, comfortably entrenched in his liberal worldview, poised for what he expected to be another routine intellectual sparring session. As each panelist presented their positions, Mercer maintained his signature demeanor, cool and confident. He effortlessly expounded on his vision for progressive reform. Then came Karoline Leavitt's turn. With a warm but determined smile, she rose to speak about her ambitions for economic revitalization and community enhancement. She advocated for policies that would address the needs of families in struggling regions, captivating many audience members who nodded in agreement. However, when Leavitt suggested that improved educational opportunities were foundational to the community's success, Mercer's expression shifted subtly from one of interest to skepticism. Snapping back with a slight smirk, he interjected, "That's lovely rhetoric, Karoline. But come on. Just because you're running doesn't mean the policies you propose have any grounding in reality." The laughter that erupted from some audience members was loud and unmistakable. Leavitt's cheeks flushed momentarily. It was an attack not just on her ideas but on her very credibility. The dismissal stung deeply as whispers of novice filled her ears. She knew then that Mercer saw her as nothing more than an irritant, an inexperienced contender to be brushed aside rather than an emerging leader. Despite feeling slighted, Leavitt collected herself quickly and responded with poise. "Jonathan," she replied firmly, "I understand your skepticism comes from experience, but it's time we start listening to those who are living these challenges every day. Policy isn't just theory, it directly affects our families." Yet Mercer's earlier remark had struck a nerve, and while some fans applauded her brave retort, others in the audience appeared hesitant, caught between the charm of a well-spoken lawyer and the earnestness of a passionate newcomer. Mercer continued his condescending laughter as if savoring their divided reactions like fine wine. What Mercer failed to grasp was that this moment would reverberate beyond that impressively lit stage. His arrogance became a rallying cry for Leavitt's supporters, fueling her campaign with newfound energy and determination against such contemptuous dismissal. As they left that evening, the liberal lawyer so certain of himself, while dismissing the nascent threat before him, the landscape altered significantly. The triggering incident solidified not only Leavitt's resolve, but also marked a moment where public perception could shift dramatically against Mercer, laying the groundwork for an escalating conflict he couldn't yet foresee. What would unfold next in their entwined paths loomed large on the horizon, a storm brewed beneath what appeared to be clear skies at first glance. In the weeks that followed the political panel, The rivalry between Jonathan Mercer and Karoline Leavitt began to intensify, drawing renewed attention from both the media and the public. Mercer, still riding high on his reputation, attempted to downplay the incident as a mere blip on his radar. He continued to engage in discussions where he effortlessly dismantled opposing viewpoints, convinced that his years of experience granted him an unshakable position. However, he failed to recognize how Leavitt's enthusiasm and determination were resonating with an electorate eager for change. Leavitt, empowered by the support she garnered during the panel incident, strategically ramped up her campaign efforts. She initiated a series of community outreach programs, town hall meetings, and social media campaigns that showcased not just her policies, but her relatability as a candidate. Through poignant storytelling about her own experiences and the struggles faced by families in her district, she personified the issues she aimed to address. Her grassroots approach began to capture media attention, further solidifying her presence as a formidable opponent. As Leavitt gained traction, Mercer's confident demeanor slowly began to fray at the edges. Whispers among peers questioned whether he had underestimated her potential entirely. While his supporters enthusiastically praised his articulate presentations, murmurs of doubt crept in. Was it wise to ridicule someone who was clearly building a dedicated following? Mercer brushed off these concerns, convinced that his established reputation would shield him from rising challengers. During this time, social media became a battleground for their contrasting ideologies. Leavitt posted videos of her attending local events and engaging with constituents, each clip showcasing her authenticity and appeal. Meanwhile, Mercer's online presence remained polished and rehearsed, logical arguments wrapped in layers of professionalism. Yet as the public engaged more with Leavitt's candidacy, they began to see through Mercer's theatrics. The media began portraying their rivalry more prominently, painting Mercer as out of touch and elitist juxtaposed with Leavitt's relatable persona. Articles circulated highlighting the stark differences between the two political styles, one steeped in traditional authority versus another fresh and audaciously defiant. For Leavitt's supporters, she represented hope. For Mercer's loyal base, he remained a stalwart defender of progressive values. As rallies for Leavitt drew larger crowds and enthusiastic cheers grew louder than Mercer's applause in similar settings, the atmosphere turned electric with anticipation for their eventual showdown. Each day brought new developments that hinted at the growing shift in public sentiment, a palpable tension where Mercer's self-assuredness began to falter against Leavitt's relentless ascent. In this rapidly evolving landscape, it became increasingly clear that Mercer's previous flippancy had consequences. The rising tension encapsulated a dramatic shift in narrative, a battle not just of policy, but of resilience and perspective between two starkly different leaders. As they prepared for their inevitable confrontation in front of voters, both knew that this clash would determine not only their futures, but also the political fabric of their community. In the wake of the political panel, Karoline Leavitt knew she needed to capitalize on Mercer's arrogant dismissal to solidify her place in the political arena. Battered but unbroken, she outlined a series of strategic moves, each designed to showcase her intelligence and resolve while countering Mercer's smugness. First, she decided to launch a digital grassroots campaign that focused on engaging her constituents. Employing social media, not just as a platform but as a means to foster community dialogue, Leavitt began sharing personal stories of families grappling with local issues, rising healthcare costs, broken education systems, and job scarcity. Her heartfelt posts resonated with many who felt neglected by established politicians, allowing her to cultivate an authentic connection with voters. As more people shared her content, it created an organic momentum that attracted attention well beyond her immediate circle. Realizing that traditional campaign strategies would not suffice against Mercer's polished presence, Leavitt organized a series of town halls across the district. These open forums encouraged honest discussions about pressing issues. While attending neighborhood events, she listened intently, taking notes on residents' concerns and ideas. This tactic not only portrayed her as approachable, but also solidified her image as a candidate genuinely invested in her community's voice, a stark contrast to Mercer's aloof persona. Meanwhile, Leavitt began to target specific demographics that had been previously overlooked by larger campaigns, young voters and working-class families who craved authenticity over rhetoric. She began appearing at local schools and community centers, often stepping outside conventional political spaces to meet people where they were comfortable. By intertwining policy proposals with real-life experiences shared by her constituents, she created powerful narratives that humanized her campaign. The anecdotes became powerful tools that illustrated how policies could lead to tangible changes in everyday lives. To counteract any remaining perceptions of inexperience, Leavitt assembled an advisory team comprising seasoned professionals from various sectors, economists, educators, healthcare advocates, all dedicated to providing informed insights into her policy development. This move showcased her strategic thinking and willingness to learn from experts while reinforcing that youth didn't equate to naivety. Leavitt also made direct comparisons with Mercer during interviews, using his dismissive remarks as a backdrop for highlighting the flaws in his arguments. Instead of retreating from conflict after their initial encounter, she framed herself as a fighter ready to stand up to established norms. Each time Mercer criticized her policies, she seized the opportunity to showcase how she offered practical solutions rather than broad theoretical concepts. As these strategies gained traction, Leavitt emerged not just as another candidate but as a formidable force within the political landscape, a symbol of change and resilience. With rallies swelling in attendance and conversations buzzing around the district regarding her initiatives, the tide was turning against Mercer's perception of control. In this evolving battle, Karoline Leavitt demonstrated that intelligence combined with genuine engagement could disrupt even the most entrenched status quo. Each strategic move she made brought her closer to challenging Jonathan Mercer, not only for electoral victory, but also for redefining what leadership could mean in their shared community. As their rivalry strengthened, both candidates sensed an inevitable confrontation brewing, a clash that would shape their futures and the very framework of local politics. As Karoline Leavitt's campaign gained momentum, a palpable shift began to occur in public opinion, one that concerned Jonathan Mercer deeply. Constituents who had previously felt uninspired or disillusioned with politics suddenly found themselves galvanized by Leavitt's grassroots message. Town halls filled with eager community members, their voices echoing with concerns that had long been ignored, creating an electric atmosphere around her candidacy. Media outlets started paying closer attention to her campaign, spotlighting the groundswell of local support that seemed to flow in direct contradiction to Mercer's dismissive predictions. Through compelling interviews and impactful press coverage, commentators increasingly described Leavitt as a refreshing voice for change, labeling her approach authentic and relatable. Social media buzz was dynamic. People began sharing personal anecdotes about how her policies resonated in their everyday lives. In response to this growing enthusiasm, Mercer found himself wrestling with mounting anxiety. As he prepared for speeches and debates, whispers of self-doubt began to infiltrate his thoughts. Could he still command the loyalty of voters who now appeared to be swayed? While Mercer maintained an image of steadfast confidence in public, behind closed doors, his team noted a discernible tension when discussing Leavitt's rise. The numbers reflected a challenge he couldn't ignore. Polls showed increasing support for Leavitt among critical voter demographics. Town hall meetings organized by Leavitt only amplified the shift. They were more than just platforms for political discourse. They became vibrant gatherings where colleagues, friends, and neighbors exchanged ideas freely, highlighting local issues and paving the path toward cooperative solutions. Comments filled the air, some enthusiastic and hopeful, while others frank and sorrowful about how community concerns had been overlooked for so long. Mercer's supporters began expressing their worries during private discussions, wondering aloud if he had miscalculated the depth of discontent brewing among constituents. Those loyal to him reflected on their changing perceptions. Was he really still the voice fighting for them? Following Newport's tumultuous experiences during town halls, his allies feared that perhaps his reputation as a progressive champion was being diluted by an increasingly animated political landscape favoring Leavitt's approach. Interestingly, the narrative around Mercer morphed from confident attorney to an out-of-touch figure who couldn't connect with real-life issues affecting ordinary citizens. Each article that highlighted Leavitt's initiatives prompted further questions about Mercer's policies. Were they relevant? Were they resonating? This contemplation incited further unease within his camp as they considered how quickly emotions can change in politics. As energy surged around Leavitt's campaign and public sentiment shifted palpably toward her platform, the anticipation built up toward Mercer grew heavier. Their rivalry came to feel less like an intellectual sparring match and more like two opposing forces clashing for the very soul of their community, each step revealing not just who would emerge victorious, but also what kind of future lay ahead. With more presence at local events and growing support evident in every interaction, it became increasingly clear that Karoline's grassroots campaign was no mere challenge. It was a movement taking shape before everyone's eyes, and one that might very well redefine leadership within this community. The tension between Jonathan Mercer and Karoline Leavitt reached a boiling point during an upcoming public event, the highly anticipated debate that would pit their contrasting visions against one another. Mercer, still riding the remnants of his arrogance, prepared meticulously, confident that his debating skills would again highlight Leavitt's inexperience. Little did he know that this event would serve as a catalyst for a turning point that could alter his career irrevocably. As the day of the debate arrived, a scandal began to unravel behind the scenes. During routine preparations, a journalist working on an investigative piece stumbled upon documents linking Mercer to a controversial case involving a large corporation accused of significant environmental violations. Years earlier, Mercer had been tasked with defending this corporation, known for its disregard for local communities and its questionable legal practices. In their pursuit of progress, Mercer had been too close to the interests of powerful clients, brushing aside the concerns of ordinary citizens in favor of profit margins. Initially, the scandal seemed contained, but as rumors spread and snippets of information leaked to the press, the public's curiosity piqued. With Leavitt's grassroots support growing daily, the media began digging deeper into Mercer's past and unearthing newly emerging claims against him. The very arrogance that had previously shielded him now left him exposed. The more he dismissed Leavitt, the more scrutiny he faced. On debate night, as hundreds gathered and cameras flashed, tension hung thick in the air. Leavitt took the stage with an air of confidence, buoyed by recent public sentiment that had shifted decidedly in her favor. Once the debate commenced, hardly was attention lost from Mercer's calculated responses when suddenly, an unexpected question arose from a member of the audience. "Mercer, how do you reconcile your role in defending environmental violations when your opponent advocates for community health?" The question reverberated in the auditorium. Mercer stammered in response, attempting to weave his past defense into a narrative of economic necessity. However, it quickly became clear that he was losing control of the narrative. Leavitt seized the moment, adamantly highlighting Mercer's ties to corporations over community welfare. The audience erupted with applause each time she articulated her points about accountability and real leadership. Mercer's face revealed disbelief. He had underestimated both Leavitt and the depth of her connection with voters. The atmosphere turned electric as accusations swirled around him, dismantling his image as a champion for progressive causes. In stark contrast to Leavitt's earnest attempts to better lives at a grassroots level, Mercer appeared increasingly out of touch. A figure who had once commanded respect now seemed vulnerable under scrutiny. By the end of the debate, it became evident that a seismic shift had occurred. What had begun as a spirited political rivalry transformed into a public spectacle, revealing not only personal weaknesses, but also ethical questions that could threaten Mercer's career altogether. The seeds of doubt planted during their exchanges blossomed into concern among his supporters. Had he indeed lost sight of whom he was meant to serve? As spectators poured out of the venue buzzing with excitement, Leavitt emerged victorious, not merely for besting her opponent in rhetoric, but for illuminating truths that resonated deeply within their community. For Jonathan Mercer, the path ahead was shrouded with uncertainty. This pivotal moment marked not just a clash of ideals, but the beginning of what could be an unraveling of everything he had built. In the aftermath of the debate, the fallout for Jonathan Mercer was swift and unforgiving. Once seen as a pillar of the community and a champion of progressive values, he now found himself embroiled in a growing scandal that overshadowed his career. Media outlets dove deep into his past, unearthing not just the environmental violations associated with the corporation he defended, but also revealing his questionable lobbying practices to protect corporate interests at the expense of community welfare. The narrative shifted from celebrating his legal victories to scrutinizing his ethics, and for Mercer this was a harsh awakening. The public backlash was immediate. Constituents who had once admired him began to question their allegiance. Social media exploded with posts dissecting his previous statements and contrasting them with the realities of his actions. Leavitt, capitalizing on this momentum, positioned herself as the antidote to Mercer's perceived hypocrisy. She appeared at community events, speaking passionately about accountability and the need for leaders who genuinely represent the people's interests. Each time she addressed a crowd, she reinforced her image as a candidate of integrity, one who listened to her constituents rather than silencing them. While Mercer struggled to regain control of his narrative, the consequences of his overconfidence became increasingly apparent. His once loyal supporters began to drift away, disillusioned by the revelations about his past and frustrated by his failure to connect with the real issues affecting their lives. The more he attempted to dismiss Leavitt as an inexperienced novice, the more they rallied around her, viewing her as a genuine alternative to his established and now tainted leadership. In stark contrast, Leavitt's campaign flourished. With each passing day, she garnered endorsements from community leaders and organizations that had previously been hesitant to support a newcomer. Her grassroots approach resonated deeply within the community. She represented not just change but a promise to address long-ignored concerns related to healthcare, education, and environmental responsibility. The energy surrounding her candidacy became infectious as volunteers flocked to her side, eager to help amplify her message. As the election drew nearer, Mercer's situation grew increasingly dire. Internal discussions within his campaign team reflected a growing sense of urgency. They knew that without a significant pivot in strategy, they risked losing everything he had worked for over 2 decades. Attempts to downplay Leavitt's influence faltered against the tidal wave of public sentiment shifting in her favor. The election results loomed large on the horizon, a climactic event that would determine not only their political futures, but also serve as a referendum on leadership ethics in their community. For Leavitt, this was a chance to solidify her position as a legitimate leader capable of enacting real change. For Mercer, it was a final opportunity to redeem himself and reclaim the trust he had lost. In this charged atmosphere filled with uncertainty and anticipation, both candidates stood on the precipice of what could be transformative shifts, not just in their careers but in the very fabric of their community's values and expectations from their leaders. As they prepared for what lay ahead, it was clear that the stakes had never been higher for either of them. As the dust began to settle following the tumultuous election, several key figures in the community took a moment to reflect on the lessons learned from the dramatic confrontation between Jonathan Mercer and Karoline Leavitt. Each character's perspective illuminated important truths about pride, humility, and the unpredictable nature of politics, which resonated deeply within the community. Jonathan Mercer, once a figure of unshakable confidence, found himself grappling with his new reality. In the quiet moments of reflection, he recognized that his arrogance had clouded his judgment. "I underestimated not just her potential, but also the depth of community sentiment," he admitted to a close confidant. In this line of work, pride can be as dangerous as any opponent. This newfound humility did not come easily. It was forged in the fires of public scrutiny and accountability. Mercer began to understand that true leadership required more than just intelligence and rhetoric. It demanded a genuine connection to the people he sought to represent. Across town, Karoline Leavitt embraced her victory with cautious optimism. She recognized that the Whirlwind campaign had become a pivotal journey, not only for herself, but also for many constituents who had long been disillusioned with politics. "I learned that leadership is about listening and responding to people's needs," she reflected during an interview. Her commitment to community engagement had forged relationships that transcended mere political alliances. In her victory speech, she emphasized gratitude. "The real triumph belongs to everyone who dared to believe change was possible." This moment crystallized her understanding that respect earned through authentic connection could wield more influence than any polished debate performance. Meanwhile, constituents began sharing their perspectives on social media and in local forums, reflecting on how events had unfolded. Many expressed feelings of empowerment and renewal. "For too long we felt ignored," one resident noted in a community meeting. "Karoline showed us that our voices count. We want leaders who stand with us, not above us." This sentiment echoed through the discussions, showcasing a collective demand for accountability from elected officials. Even former supporters of Mercer spoke up in candid conversations about their shifting loyalties. "I always admired his legal mind," one longtime supporter confessed, "but I couldn't ignore how detached he became from our everyday problems." This candid acknowledgement highlighted a broader lesson. Leadership requires not only expertise, but also an unwavering commitment to community well-being. As these reflections permeated discussions throughout the community, it became evident that both candidates had sparked an evolution in political consciousness among constituents. The battle was not merely over votes, it had ignited a movement advocating for transparency, integrity, and respect in politics. In navigating these lessons learned, both Mercer and Leavitt would need to adapt moving forward. For Mercer, it meant reevaluating his approach to leadership. For Leavitt, it required staying grounded amidst newfound success. Together, they illustrated the unpredictable yet transformative nature of politics, where vulnerability can foster growth and listening can lead to profound change. As the community moved forward, they carried with them a sense of renewed hope, a realization that effective leadership thrives on humility, respect, and an unwavering dedication to serving those who entrusted them with their voices. The path ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, but these collective lessons were shaping a future defined by collaboration rather than division. As the story of Jonathan Mercer and Karoline Leavitt unfolded, it became a compelling narrative intertwining personal ambition with broader societal themes. Their rivalry illuminated the complexities of political life, revealing how individual actions resonate within the larger fabric of community expectations and aspirations. For Mercer, this journey served as a stark reminder of the pitfalls of arrogance and disengagement. Once the embodiment of confidence and success, he emerged from the experience with a newfound awareness of the importance of humility and genuine connection. His fall from grace was not merely a personal setback, but a cautionary tale about leadership's demands in an era where authenticity is paramount. As he reflected on his missteps, it became evident that his legal acumen could not compensate for a failure to represent those whom he was supposed to serve. This lesson transformed him, urging him to reevaluate his values and approach in a landscape now shifting beneath his feet. Conversely, Karoline Leavitt's ascent highlighted the power of grassroots movements and the significance of listening to constituents. Her journey was emblematic of a generation yearning for change, one that craved leaders who would address their needs rather than speak over them. Through her grassroots efforts, she demonstrated that authenticity and relatability could triumph over established norms and conventional tactics. Leavitt embraced every victory as a collective triumph, underscoring that her success was rooted in the community's voices rather than her ambitions alone. The contrasting arcs of these two characters underscored the unpredictable nature of politics. With each decision and interaction, the stakes grew higher, reminding both individuals and the community at large that leadership is not just about winning elections, it is about earning respect and serving with integrity. As constituents rallied around Leavitt's campaign, they propelled her toward a transformative role that symbolized hope and renewed accountability. In reflecting on these events, it became clear that both Mercer and Leavitt had ultimately contributed to an awakening within their community, a realization that informed citizens demand more than mere promises. They seek authenticity and a commitment to the common good. The election was not simply about which candidate prevailed. It was about instilling new values into the political discourse, values characterized by transparency, accessibility, and respect. As the dust settled on this chapter, both characters stood at critical junctures in their lives. Leavitt's victory represented not just an opportunity for herself, but also for a community eager for change, an affirmation that their voices could reshape their political landscape. For Mercer, it posed an invitation to return to basics, to listen, learn, and reconnect with those he had once championed. Ultimately, this narrative leaves readers with a sense of resolution, not just for the characters, but for all those engaged in public life. It serves as a poignant reminder that while ambition may drive individuals forward, it is the intertwining threads of humility, respect, and accountability that truly define lasting leadership. In this evolving political saga, both Mercer and Leavitt illustrate that the road to progress is paved with lessons learned from both triumphs and failures, a journey that continues to inspire as communities advocate for the leaders they genuinely deserve.